Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling a question I know many of you have probably wrestled with. How do you sound truly natural in English? You might have years of grammar study, right? You might ace every test, but still feel that little disconnect in everyday conversation.
Yeah, that feeling of something's just off.
Exactly. So if you've ever thought, my grammar is okay, but I still don't sound truly fluent, well, this deep dive is absolutely for you.
Indeed. We've been digging into excerpts from a really insightful source. It's an episode from a podcast called Think English, Learn It, Live It.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and this material, it brilliantly challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom about language learning, especially the idea that, you need to memorize hundreds of grammar rules to achieve that natural sound.
Okay, so our mission today is to really unpack what natural English actually means. We want to bust some surprisingly common myths.
Definitely some myths to bust there.
And then arm you with practical techniques and maybe a totally different mindset to help you sound more relaxed, more confident, and ultimately more real.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's dive right in. Okay, let's start with the big question then. What is natural English? I think maybe a lot of listeners might assume it means speaking incredibly fast or using really complicated, like academic words.
Right, that's a common misconception.
But the source seems to challenge that, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. What's fascinating here is that the source defines natural English as sounding, well, relaxed, confident, and genuine.
Relaxed, confident, genuine.
It's essentially how people actually speak every single day.
Yeah.
It's not about perfection, it's more about connection.
Exactly. And think about how often native speakers naturally blend words together. Like phrases like gonna instead of going to, wanna instead of want to, or lemme instead of let me.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
It's everywhere once you start listening for it, really.
And this phenomenon, it's what linguists often call connected speech.
Connected speech. Right. So we look at the bigger picture. It highlights that everyday communication often involves sounds linking up, merging, kind of for efficiency, really. It makes words flow together.
Makes sense.
It's not really about breaking grammar rules per se. It's just how the language naturally moves when spoken, quickly. The goal is understanding, not perfect textbook precision.
And this really makes me wonder about something many of us are taught, the absolute importance of grammar. Does the source suggest that focusing only on grammar might actually be a barrier, like get in the way of sounding natural?
It definitely raises that important question, yeah. A big myth the source pushes back against is that being grammatically perfect automatically means you sound natural.
Okay.
It gives a great, I think, very relatable example. A student who would say, I will go to the market. I will buy vegetables.
Oh, yeah, you can just hear it, can't you? Perfectly correct, no mistakes.
Totally correct.
But undeniably unnatural in, like, a normal chat. It sounds, stilted. Exactly. So how would a native speaker likely phrase that? Well, probably something closer to, I'm going to go to the market, pick up some veggies.
Gonna go pick up some veggies. Much smoother.
It's subtle, maybe, but a really significant difference in the rhythm and the phrasing.
Yeah.
And here's a statistic that might actually surprise you. According to a study by the University of Essex, a remarkable 78%.
78%.
Yeah, 78% of what we perceive as native-level fluency is based on phrasing and rhythm, not grammar accuracy.
Wow, 78%. That is truly staggering. So it's literally about how it sounds, not just how it's written down on paper.
Precisely.
It's a huge shift in perspective for a lot of learners, I think.
It really is.
Okay, so given that incredible statistic, it's clear we need to focus on different techniques, right? Not just grammar drills.
Right.
The source highlights 3 key ones that can genuinely change how you sound. First up, using common chunks.
Chunks. Yeah, I like that term. They're like ready-made building blocks of language. They're real phrases that native speakers use constantly. Linguists sometimes call them collocations, words that just sound right together. Like make a decision, not do a decision.
Gotcha.
So instead of painstakingly building sentences word by word by word, you learn and use these prefabricated units.
Like what? What are some examples?
Well, examples from the source include things like, I'm not sure, sounds good, no worries, that makes sense. Simple stuff.
Right, everyday phrases.
Exactly. They just make your speech flow much more effortlessly.
That makes so much sense. It speeds things up instantly, I imagine. Okay, second technique. The source mentions one that genuinely changed things for one of the original podcast hosts. Shadowing.
Ah, shadowing, yes. This involves repeating after native speakers.
Like mimicking.
Yeah, mimicking not just their words, but crucially their tone, their speed, and their rhythm, the musicality of it.
Where would you find stuff to shadow?
Oh, anywhere, really. You can use resources like YouTube videos, movie clips, even other podcasts like this one. The key is probably to start slow and really focus on that rhythm and flow of the language. Don't worry about perfection at first.
Okay, focus on the music.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the third technique, which ties directly back to that 78% statistic, right? Focusing on rhythm, not just rules.
Exactly. Rhythm over rules, you could say. The source gives a brilliant example.
What you doing later?
What you doing later, yeah.
Colin, it's a totally normal, natural contraction of what are you doing later?
Right.
So this highlights that you should practice saying phrases almost like singing a song. Pay close attention to the rhythm, the stress patterns. Where does the emphasis fall? It helps you kind of integrate into the natural sound of spoken English. It's less about strict correctness, more about that musicality we mentioned.
Okay, so chunks, shadowing, and rhythm. Got it. Now, to really illustrate the power of these techniques, our deep dive shares a really compelling real-life story, doesn't it? About a learner named Leo.
Ah, yes, Leo's story. It's great. He became incredibly fluent, and his transformation wasn't about studying harder or, cramming more grammar rules.
So what did he do?
Well, he describes how watching the TV show Friends actually helped him a lot.
Friends. Okay, how?
He said he stopped pausing all the time to think about rules. Instead, he just started instinctively repeating what the character said.
Just copying them.
Yeah, copying their tone, their delivery, everything. And he literally had people starting to say to him, wow, you sound American.
Just from watching Friends and mimicking?
Pretty much. So he didn't hit the grammar books harder, he listened smarter, and he started thinking in phrases in those chunks we talked about.
That's a fantastic example. It really shows it in action. Okay, so let's try and summarize the crucial takeaways from this deep dive for everyone listening, because this really does shift the paradigm of language learning, I think.
Definitely. So, first, natural English is fundamentally about rhythm, tone, and using those real-life, ready-made phrases or chunks.
Right, not just isolated words or perfect grammar.
Second, focus on learning those chunks or collocations rather than getting bogged down only in isolated grammar rules.
Makes sense. Learn phrases, not just rules.
Third, actively practice shadowing native speakers. Really try to internalize their flow and rhythm.
Get that musicality.
Fourth, prioritize how English sounds when it's spoken, not just how it looks written down. They're often quite different.
A very key point. Spoken versus written.
And finally, maybe the biggest one. Ultimately, the goal probably shouldn't be perfection in grammar,
Right.
but rather genuine, effortless connection when you communicate.
Connection over correction. I like that. So what does all this mean for you listening right now? How can you actually put this into practice? Like today?
Okay, here's a challenge, directly inspired by our deep dive. Pick one short scene, just one, from your favorite English movie or TV series.
Okay.
Actively shadow it. Repeat what they say. Try to match the rhythm, the intonation. Do it maybe 5 times.
5 times. Yeah.
And then just take a moment to listen to yourself. Maybe record yourself. Pay attention to how your own rhythm and tone start to change. You might be surprised how quickly you notice the difference.
That's a great practical step. We really hope this deep dive has given you a fresh, maybe even liberating perspective on what it truly means to sound natural in English.
Yeah, remember, fluent sounding English often starts with real life, not just with rules in a book.
Absolutely.
And that leaves us with a maybe provocative thought to consider. If communication, real connection, is truly the goal of language, then how much of our focus should really remain on correctness, textbook correctness, versus embracing the organic flow and the rhythm of human connection? What does it really mean to speak a language beyond just knowing its grammar?
That's definitely something to chew on. Food for thought.
We'll leave you to ponder that.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, keep diving deep.